Thanks, Cibe. That was a nice insight into how ML models were produced and deployed to production in those days. Right. So I want your reflection because it's been a decade for you now, right? Since you started your career, you had a good experience of your background in data engineering, as you rightly said, that came into a lot of help in getting to understand the data better before doing any fancy modeling. And once the modeling was done, then the question was, how do you get it deployed? Deployed, when we say deployed, I think of software engineering. So any software engineering application, when it gets created, right, it gets deployed. Gets deployed to a server. So you need to have some machine which could serve that to customers, right? And that machine also has a throttle, as a limit on how much requests it can accept. So if that is not able to do, then you have to scale the machines. From one machine, you have to go to 5 machines, 10 machines. But the point is, once that scale of requests is done, those machines need to come back to original also. That's why we say elastic capability, where it can scale up, scale down, those kind of capabilities. And then you also talked about the data drift, the model drift, the things which need to be looked into and always need to be monitored. And accordingly, the model needs to be either tweaked or the data needs to be tweaked or whatever is needed to be done to be done. So if ML and of late, I have started hearing a lot about MLOps. I think it is evolving out of this whole capability of automating more and more workflows. And it is kind of originating from its parent DevOps, which is kind of a pretty core to software development, where you have built something that needs to go to QA, then it needs to go to production. Sometimes there is a pre-production environment also. Then there needs to be a bunch of test cases which need to be run, and that needs to work well and needs to be signed off. And then your application goes live. And when the application goes live, it needs to work, it needs to be up and running, it cannot crash, right? So these are all the capabilities when we talk about reliability, when I talk about scalability, then we talk about the, what do you say, the uptime, all those things that it needs to work. So now coming down to the field of ML ops, which is kind of marry between the DevOps and the machine learning, where an ML ops engineer needs to take care of all these different roles and responsibilities. So my first question to you would be around this, how is the evolution? So the trends which you talked about, okay, there were lots of things to be done earlier. You have to play with machines. Now you have cloud. Now and they have a bunch of different tools which have come, which kind of takes care of a lot of different, like for example, MLflow and Databricks. Today, I would say makes a killer combination for anyone who wishes to say do something ML ops deployment, productionizing, and monitoring, right? Because I personally when had a question that, okay, you need to help a bunch of people pick up a machine learning model, could be a simple churn model, and productionize it. That was the state of the requirement. What would be your suggestion in terms of infrastructure? I would say that, okay, it's a very bland question because unless you provide context, it is difficult to give me an exact answer. But if you ask me what would be the simplest route to do that, I would say go for Databricks. It gives all the capabilities and you just need to connect with your source. It gives you all the capabilities to run a complete end-to-end MLOps production pipeline, right? So my question to you is that how has the world evolved, the MLOps world evolved, and what does it look today? What are the things which we have achieved? What are the things which we are yet to achieve? Or what are the challenges which you see, these challenges are there and these could be tackled? I think MLOps could be adopted more at scale for more and more problem statements. What do you see as exciting things coming up, and what are the challenges which you see still exist?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Amit. So, see, the first basic thing which I could see potentially in many of the experience, as per based on my experiences, basically, so we have something called model risk organization or model risk officers or whoever, like. So I've seen relatively of many posts in LinkedIn, like they have a separate scrutiny based actually. So it's not just a data scientist builds a model. So there are certain folks who give a official sign off. So it is not a sign off which is given from the technical side, like not by the stakeholders actually. So basically, when the stakeholders approve only, you are going to take the model from POC to production, right? So, but we do have internal, most of the companies, they do have their internal model risk officers or model risk or organization, where there would be a bunch of data scientists who would thoroughly analyze why the model is going into production. Actually, it's not just randomly putting a model to production, right?
Right.
And the second thing is basically for let's say a data engineer is going to take up this model and put it into production. So it is not a simple Databricks job. They are going to trigger it, right? So it is not a simple job. So the first thing they need to know is how the data source is coming into the real time, right? So do we really need BigQuery to process it, or do we really need what to say this Azure? We have snowflakes. Do we really need Snowflake to process it? So how do I connect the Snowflake to Databricks? So this data itself is a challenge here. So we need to clearly leverage the data part, like what are the features we need to handle and what are the things to go forward. And the third one is basically once you know the data, and basically model is just you are calling a wrapper function, right? Okay, I'm just calling it and then I'm dumping the predictions. But it does not stop here, right? So now I am not sure, like most of the organizations are still doing the same ML flow Databricks way. So there is a capability built around it, right? So
Right.
organizations are heavily investing on building generic capabilities. Like you could build a simple ML ops framework, right? So which can measure the model drift, data drift, and automatically invoke a training job.
Right.
So that is where the focus is completely shifting more on. So it's not just using a Databricks or MLflow and then just building the same flavor. It's like, how do I do a retraining job through an automated fashion with the feedback incorporated? Let's say the sales feature is not impacting the target. So how do I do a different transformation to a sales feature, right? So how do I do it so that it is giving a better model performance in real time? So what additional thing I can create out of a feature so that it is going to impact that churn better? So these kind of things is where people are mostly focused on, like building a Lego blocks based on at each level actually, and not to use the same thing. So it's not just having a Jupyter notebook directly deploying it to production. So we have a common. So from a basic software engineering point of view, you need to have only two classes: data loader, model loader. So model loader is nothing but is going to load the model. Data loader is going to run the data. Then you are going to have a runner function. It will just do df dot predict of data. That's it. Model dot predict of data. It should do, and you will get the predictions. So it all depends on how we do all these two blocks, and then how we deploy it to production.
Right.
And as mentioned, the inference part and the retraining part is mostly important these days.
Right.
So when do you want to take a call for retrain? So that is where the telemetry dashboard, the ML dashboard with all the, whether it's Power BI or where Data Studio, whichever you develop. So that needs to be analyzed by the data engineers or data scientists for sure. We'll have that real-time dashboarding. So if an organization have all these things automated, then we are sorted, right? So
Nice.
you can seamlessly take multiple models to production.
Got it. Got it. But one flip side, going with all these cloud solutions or sort of platform as a service solutions is always your cost. Although it makes a lot of things easier. I mean, serverless has made a lot of things easier, but it can also very quickly run into high bills, right?
Correct.
So my question is that when it comes to pain, right? Then people start pointing fingers. Okay, the solution is pretty expensive, although it is doing something. So we have a pretty bad ROI. So what is some of your perspective or experience around cost management? Has it ever happened that, okay, we have been doing a project which, yeah, successful, looks pretty cool, but behind the back, you know that it is running into a lot of costs, so you need to do some optimization. What are some of the mental models you would suggest if a data scientist is into this situation and you have to get into some sort of cost control measures? What do you do?
See, for the development and POC perspective, I will have to use a virtual machine, right? So
Yeah.
without a virtual machine or a GPU-based machine VMs, it is difficult for a data scientist to build a model. So
Correct.
for training the model, of course, you will have to need all those necessary tools.
Right.
So there cannot be any cost cutting on the training the bot.
Right.
But the thing is, during the time of deployment, so that is where, right, there are either two routes to take. Either if I use a cloud-based solution, you can use GCP, Azure, or ML. So most of the organizations take an clear plan. Let's say if my data is in BigQuery, or let's say if the data is in Azure SQL Studio, or if my data is in Redshift in AWS. So then they try to leverage the Databricks or MLflow kind of solutions and go forward it. But let's take an example. If my data is in Snowflake, so in that case, it's a data warehouse, right? You don't have to rely upon any clouds. So in that cases, many organizations still think of using a Docker based solution. So you can create a Docker file out of your Python code, and that
Right.
Docker can run across, you can spin up a simple Azure Kubernetes service, right? You can use Kubernetes to orchestrate that Docker file, right? So you can say create a Python environment and run all these stuffs in the pods, and then you can schedule, orchestrate the time as well of the job. So this is one interesting part where organizations try to look into it. But as you mentioned, for model training, the infrastructure has to be invested. So there is no compromise for developers on that. But if the stakeholders don't want to invest heavily in cloud, if they want to directly connect Python and Snowflake, and you have Snowpark, you have all these things in Snowflake advancement there, you can easily go with Azure Kubernetes Service or Dockers and
Mm.
get a solution. That
Mm.
is one interesting angle to look if you are going to shed the cloud from
Got
it.
it. And the three key pillars which you talked about: data, model, and infrastructure, right? And what I know is from a DevOps perspective or DevOps engineer, one very key aspect which a DevOps engineer looks at is infrastructure as code. How do you optimize your infrastructure in such a way that you don't need to, for example, if you spin up something, a service, which once you spin up and it is consumed by minute or hour. So suppose I need to do some workflow, I spin it up, complete it, shut it down. And when next time it happens, it again spins it up. So there is a need of infrastructure as code here, right? So how much is the role of a core DevOps engineer with automation skills? Is have you seen being important or not so important when it comes to a full scale MLOps project?
So, see, even before the infrastructure, so the DevOps role is first mandatorily here in analyzing the code which is built by the developers, right? Be it data
Okay.
scientists and data engineers. So they really need to set up the CI/CD pipeline. So
Hmm.
enables Sonar Cube checks. You will have to write unit test cases, do the integration testing. So to see if you change a particular part in the code, you raise a proper user Git flow model. So you are able to test it in the test environment. You have, then only you move to prod. So dev, test, prod. You have a mirror environment of your prod environment called test. So you build everything in the dev environment, raise a PR to run your model in the test environment. Then you go into prod. So this is even before infrastructure as a server, right? So
Hmm.
their job is to ensure the code has all the necessary things. And as
Hmm.
you are aware, Sonar Cube or uh, Python has many packages, right? So if
Hmm.
you have add all those extensions, it will give you a detailed report where there is a code duplication, where code smell or some
Hmm.
leak. So you can't code all the secrets within the code. So there should
Hmm.
be best practices to handle a YAML file. So you
Hmm.
can't hard code a model folder into the code. You should have a YAML file, JSON file. So all those different parts, it should be handled by them. That's the major part. They
Got
will
it.
have to set up an environment which makes this happen. Now the
Hmm.
next part is for them is to monitor the developers are not overutilizing the
Yeah.
cluster.
Yeah.
Right? So you will have to get only a list of permissions, right? Developers cannot keep the cluster ideal after 20 minutes. If the cluster
Right,
is ideal after 20 minutes, it should automatically shut down. So
right.
all these cost and the resource management, it is heavily done by the DevOps even in the MLOps setup actually. So the
Okay,
developers are very clear to use these best practices currently.
got it, got it. So my next question would be that you have worked in two distinct domains. One has been retail e-commerce, and currently it's healthcare. And especially when it comes to banking, insurance, healthcare, the data security, data privacy matters a lot. So how do you see the domain or the domain compliance requirements, right? Hitting an MLOps project, because there you just can't move data like just like that, right? There would be some data points which where there would be access issues where not everybody could do that, or there could be a need where you need to mask the data. So how do you see a change of domain impacting a typical MLOps project for that domain? How does domain impact your project?
Okay, so basically, I have built my churn model. So initially, the churn model was for a telecom customer. So since it is a telecom customer, so you will not directly have any the information, the private information, right? You will have a unique primary key, and you will have all the demographic attributes. So here, there is no much risk of any information, right? You cannot identify any information with the basic primary keys. So here it is straightforward actually. You don't have to worry about deploying it into production. But currently in the healthcare organization, so we have something called PHA, right? That's protected health information. So basically, you will have to do some masking. So the HIPAA compliant has some 18 PHA information. If you Google it, so you will get those 18 information, patient name, date of birth, all these different things. There is a mechanism to mask it, and we get the transform data and we work on it. So that
Hmm.
is how the compliance issue we are auditing it, and it is not able to. So if somebody looks into the data, it cannot be easily able to retract it, right? Because you might never know which position, which part in the data has been masked, right? So that's one good analysis on like how the information gets changed in one domain to other domain.
Right,
So that's
right.
the basic masking thing.
And does the infrastructure, does the architecture gets how does the architecture look? Does the architecture in a healthcare would look different, significantly different from an say ML project, productionized ML project architecture of a retail domain? Do you see additional components coming in when it comes to healthcare because it is additional compliance?
Basically, so as discussed, so basically, instead of directly using a data X, we will be
Mhm.
using a transform data X dash.
That transformation has been done by someone else
Transformation is
already.
obviously a part of your architecture, right? So
Got
you
it.
are going to change it into you do some masking to an
Yeah,
existing data, and then you are going to use on it.
yeah.
In case of telecom, you don't have to do that
You don't have to do
transformation.
that.
So that's the only difference. But the thing is, the underlying data science architecture will still
Principles
remain.
remains the same. Right. Understood. Got it. Awesome. So I think we have discussed pretty much about the workflows or the kind of workflows which are happening today. What are the some of, if I ask you some of the tech stack to quote different kind of tech stack which you have seen, or different kind of tech stack which is used today for delivering a scalable, reliable, productionized ML project. Can you quote some of those tech stacks which are pretty popular today? For example, in software engineering, Mean Stack was popular, Merge Stack was popular. Do you suggest some sort of tech stacks which is really good to go for if somebody wants to build an ML ops project?
So basically, if you could tell me the ideal tech stack which I would use if I have my own startup or any company, my own company is basically Airflow is very good for scheduling all the jobs
Nice.
actually. So
Hmm.
I love Airflow to do it, and I really love Snowflake actually. So the
Hmm.
how the data warehousing is stored. So I would use Snowflake for storing data and processing it actually, and to run all the jobs. Databricks is very powerful and it is still irreplaceable at this point in time.
Mm.
And to deploy basic ML models and even NLP models, ML flow is going hand in hand with Databricks.
Yes.
So the versioning to trigger a job, everything, it looks good. So from the data standpoint, it is Snowflake, and from the ML standpoint, it is Databricks and ML flow, hands down, like that's the one. And to orchestrate it, Airflow is good. So since it gives you a neat end-to-end pipeline, all I can do all these things. So
Great.
without huge cost incurred in a cloud and the compute instances, I can do all these things within these tech stack and do it.
Super.
So that's my suggestion actually. So
Got
which I would love to do it any day.
Got it. All right. So I think we'll get to my final and the most, I would say, exciting question is that how has Gen AI enabled or disabled, made the life easy or difficult of today's data scientist who wants to get these projects enabled, and not only the ML project. Today, when somebody says, okay, we talk about LLM project, right? Where LLM can do a lot of things. So what do you see with all your experience of a decade, that how does this technology is impacting people like you, or like people who are working in this kind of problems where you have to build scalable production ready data machine learning models? What do you see, Cibe?
So, see, that is what, right? So, so we were too much into a era of mission ML models actually. So the last 10 years of decade was so much into the ML structure because not many organization had that structure to adapt to it. So let's say if I want to build a churn model, I need 1,000 companies. If I'm going to take this to market, I need 1,000 kind of companies to similarly get data, right? So I need to capture a demographics data, I need to capture a churn related data, I need to capture some offer related, payment related. So I need a typical format. I need somehow to capture the data. But now, since we are moving completely to an LLM ops or NLP kind of setup, where you just need to have a reviews kind of data, right? Let's say if you want to analyze text data. So if you have more and more unstructured data, you can get good patterns out of it. So we are in this era now. Now, getting unstructured data is not a challenge. Like every organization has a collective unstructured data. So let's take a simple example. So let's take a ServiceNow request, right? So when a ServiceNow issue is solved, you can write a feedback for that particular issue. You will know what type of issue is there. So you can easily classify that issue, what kind of issue. So to adapt this, any organization can adapt it because ServiceNow has been used by many organizations. So let's take an example of a Jira. So you have a task name, task description, and task. What does the task talks about? So you can easily classify these kind of problems. So now, with the advent of all these LLMs and NLP technologies getting too powerful, now every organization is in a ready to adapt it, but it will take some time to adapt it. But every organization is prepared comparatively where we stood 10 years back when I started with that traditional ML approaches. But now with all these NLP and LLM getting so much powerful, so even a kid is talking about of doing a LoRa fine tuning, right? So any person is more interested in doing all these things.
Right.
So that is where the unstructured data, imaging, all these things are getting so much powerful these days. And one good thing with all this Gen AI leveraging in day-to-day activities, it is giving us to explore various options.
Yeah.
So it is making the data scientist to concentrate more. So rather, how does a data scientist work? Okay, learn some research paper X, try to implement that, try to know whether it's scalable or not. Now we all get into that prompt engineering mode to ask the relevant question to ChatGPT or OpenAI or what kind of tools, Gemini, and then we are able to get those relevant answers, and we are trying to do a deep analysis on those answers, and we are trying to implement it.
Yeah.
So in a way, we are not, it's not just a copy paste, right? So you are trying to go deeper with all the approaches you are getting out of it, and then you are trying to leverage it. So in a way, it has made our work easier, but we might end up with forgetting the codes, right?
I know
Maybe people won't emphasize on syntax going forward.
it
Like
is a challenge. Yes.
traditional interview of solving problems might
Yeah.
change,
Mm.
but at the end of the day, we go breadth in depth into a concept wise. So that
Yes.
is what it is enabling us to do it.
Yes. Very good.
So that is what it's been long for me. Like started with all those basic ML algorithms and getting advanced to all these NLP based techniques is where it has progressed in my career actually. Currently working around the same.
And finally, Shruti, how do you see the productivity gain in ML engineers, MLOps engineers with the advent of Gen AI? I see there are a lot of, for example, in a typical workflow of a data engineer, there could be very different things. There could be data modeling, data storage, data cleaning, data wrangling, preparation. And what we do today is that we try to find opportunity of how our productivity could be increased in different stages, right? With the advent of Gen AI. And this is other than code generation. Code generation is definitely a productivity gain. But other than that, do you see some other components of the ML flow, the MLOps workflow, which you are really getting an observable productivity gain, or you are saying, wow, this has worked and this has saved me X hours for me. Has there been instances, or do you see any general patterns coming of productivity gains in the workflow of machine learning engineer today?
So the one thing is basically, I would say, to analyze different tools better, right? Like I'm not sure how many documentation is available to, let's say, if I want to use an infrastructure X actually. So if you are trying to at least ask ChatGPT to tell us, okay, if it is Glue better or Airflow better or Azure Data Factory better. So at least it is giving us a basic idea or a basic analysis, even without trying it on our data, right? So
Hmm.
it is giving a direction to the ML engineers at least. So
Hmm.
let's say you have been a person who is trained on AWS for 10 years,
Right.
and you move into another new organization who is into GCP.
Hmm.
So you know how Glue works, but you don't know how Airflow works. So you know how to configure Glue using a DAG and create a whole
Yeah.
pipeline, but you don't know how Airflow works. So in
Hmm.
that case, rather googling things and getting all those understanding from it. So obviously, it is difficult to understand Airflow
Yeah.
documentation because it's a vast. It has 1,000 operators actually, and it is very difficult to memorize all the operators.
Yeah.
So one thing is very good that it is giving the direction, at least for ML engineers, right? They
Yeah.
can easily tell or easily pick up the choices actually. So earlier those days, it was difficult for us to take a decision or a conclusion, right? Because there is no evidence to take it.
So it is
So
cutting
here,
down on the research effort, and you are
yes,
getting to.
exactly. That is the basic exploration effort. So it is telling you have three options. If you try these three options, it is giving you that what's the net result out of all
Yeah.
three. So now with this at a starting point, I pick Airflow now and try directly on that Airflow, right? Rather
Right.
attacking five different things, doing a POC on five random things. Here I know the whole depth of it. So I take one approach and I'm very clear about the approach. It is going
Hmm.
to tell you the complete flow. If you use Airflow, you are going to end up with all these things. You will have to use the BigQuery operator. You will have to use the Python operator. You will have to use the shell operator. You will have to use the Kubernetes operator. You will have to use a Docker. So
Yeah.
it will give you those whole flow, right? Which in 4 or 5 years, it was a challenge, right? A
Yeah.
DevOps engineer has to sit for 1 month and do a crash course on it. So that is what
Hmm.
enablement has happened. Like,
Right.
if you are strong with your fundamentals, it can easily gel with yours, and the MLOps engineers can easily gain out of it.
Learning has become more and more on the flow as you are going and hitting a problem and you're getting to possible solutions and then you're trying them out and getting to your results faster. I think that's a universal productivity gain across any job profile if you see to get to the right knowledge faster. And that's the problem which these tools have definitely solved. But I truly believe that nobody can replace that experience. And as you rightly said, if I'm not writing code today, it's different for a CB not writing code versus a fresher not writing code. Because if you haven't gone through that grind, it is really difficult to be in that control of the situation. It is very easy to kind of give over the entire control to AI, as it is happening with the new term called vibe coding, right? So it's a difficult question to answer, because as a business person, I would see, oh my God, I'm getting results so quickly. I'm only worrying about results. But somebody who's doing it right will always question that, have we even observed what's happening before in the code? Who knows there is a malicious code in the code base, right? Who knows that the logic is, and I have faced it hands-on, built some simple app, and as I was trying to open it on my browser got stuck, right? And like, what's happening? Then I had to check with my developer. He said that there is a pretty bad code written, which is kind of looping and it is kind of holding your browser. So it's like you can do a lot of things, but the more you are in control, the more knowledgeable you are. I think there is no shortcut to knowledge, right? So whichever field you be. So great, Sibi. I think it was a very, very insightful conversation. And I think I personally got to learn a lot about this journey of, I would say, a data professional. Because if somebody like you has done data engineering, somebody has done Hadoop, somebody has done data science, somebody has done ML, I think it's a complete data professional who kind of has gone through the every aspect of, right from the data ingestion to the storing to the wrangling to the cleaning to the modeling to the deployment to the monitoring to again to the feedback loop. And I think that's a very superb experience, which I think if anybody has, uh, do not need to be scared of the AI, of the advent of AI in this one. So I thank a lot, CB, again for joining me on a Friday to have this conversation. Looking forward to a lot of learning from your end.
Thanks, Amit. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Take it, CB. Thanks a lot for your time.
Bye.